In July of last year, it was announced that NASCAR would host a unique event never before seen in its now 75-year history on its national touring calendars, a street race. NASCAR's Cup and Xfinity Series will race around Independence Day weekend on the streets of Chicago, Illinois, in the Chicago Loop District. The track will follow what was first a conceptual track on iRacing for the eNASCAR iRacing Pro Invitational Series. The event will become the third different venue to host a NASCAR Cup and Xfinity Series race on Independence Day weekend this decade, after Indianapolis in 2020, with the Cup Series racing on the Oval and the Xfinity Series on the IndyCar Road Course, and then 2021 and last year at Road America. While street racing is nothing new for stock cars, given that NASCAR's Pinty Series currently races on streets such as Toronto, Ontario, the former NASCAR-sanctioned Southwest Tour once hosted races in downtown Los Angeles, California, and the ARCA West Series hosted races in Tacoma and Spokane, Washington from 1986 to 1988. Today's video will look back at another stock car series that once held a street race on Independence Day weekend. Also doubling as a lost media report, today's video will be a look back at the 1994 ARCA Menard Series Des Moines Grand Prix. In March of 1994, it was announced through Hawkeye Racing News that the ARCA Menard Series would race on the streets of Des Moines, Iowa, Sunday, July 3, as a support for the SCCA's Trans Am Tour. Des Moines Grand Prix President Jack Housby announced that the series would join the Grand Prix race weekend in an attempt to salvage the struggling race event, then in the final year of its 5-year contract. As a result of historic flooding that forced the cancellation of much of the 1993 race program, including the headlining Trans Am event, Housby attempted to use the ARCA race as a chance to make up from the revenue lost the previous year. Initially, the plan was to have the NASCAR West Series instead of ARCA racing on the streets of Des Moines. While then NASCAR President Bill France Jr. was interested in the idea of having a NASCAR race through the city, given that the Cup Series was ripe for racing in the upper Midwest at the time, he later backed out, citing the 1 year left in the SCCA contract. As a result, Housby approached then ARCA President Bob Loga to see if his flagship series would run on the city streets. By being able to renegotiate the sanctioning fees for the 1994 race weekend, the Grand Prix was able to afford ARCA. Then SCCA Pro Racing President Dan Greenwood was quoted as saying, "Our reaction is, that's fine with us, if they want them. We habitually run with series and other sanctioning bodies, and as long as we could get, and we seem to have gotten, a reasonable schedule for the weekend, then it's fine with us." Incidentally, ARCA's closest rivals, the American Speed Association, announced a race earlier at Hawkeye Downs Raceway for its then flagship AC Delco Challenge Series on July 4, the same day as the Trans Am race. Besides series regulars such as 10-time ARCA champion Frank Kimmel and 1994 series champion Bobby Bowser, the 1994 Des Moines Grand Prix would see some non-series regulars attempt to race in the field. The then recently departed Atlanta Falcons head coach Jerry Glanville was one of the first non-series regulars to announce an entry for the race. Going into 1994, Glanville had made 6 previous starts in the Xfinity Series between his debut season of 1992 and the previous season of 1993, finishing a best of 20th at Volusia County Speedway on Independence Day 1992. 1994 would mark the debut season of Glanville in ARCA competition, where he'd make his first start at Talladega Superspeedway, retiring late in the race due to crash damage in 29th. Glanville's car that season was prepared by Steve Barkdahl, the son of former Cup Series competitor Phil Barkdahl, who too would enter the Des Moines ARCA race, and Ernie Elliott, the brother of the 1988 Cup Series champion Bill Elliott, who would supply the engines. 2 Central Iowa drivers, Wayne Larson of Ames and Chuck Hemmingson of Des Moines, would also enter the ARCA race. For Larson, it was a matter of turning his car from a superspeedway package to a short track package. Speaking to Des Moines Register staff writer Jeff Olson, he mentioned that while the primary work would be on the front end, duct work to cool the brakes, and spring and shock setups, his main focus was getting a proper steering setup, given his car was not designed for tight turning. Rather than spending $5,000 to rent a car, Larson explained his reasoning for keeping his superspeedway car for the race. It's a very expensive body. You tear a side off this thing, and you're talking $4,000, $5,000 there. The superspeedway bodies are $10,000. It's part of the car. It's almost like a unibody, all bolted onto the frame. The body is steel, and it's welded to the chassis. Chuck Hemmingson, meanwhile, had competed in several Des Moines street races prior to entering the 1994 ARCA race. Going into the 1994 race weekend, Hemmingson had one win at the venue by taking top honors at a 1989 SCCA race truck event. Going into the race weekend, Hemmingson brought a new untested car, but the benefit of having track experience and good brakes would offset the car he had planned to enter for the event. We've gone out and gotten some NASCAR-style 6-piston AP brake calipers, just like the ones NASCAR guys use at places like Martinsville or Sears Point, their most troublesome tracks for brakes. I didn't want to have anything but the absolute best in brakes because the track here rewards good braking more than horsepower. Prior to 1994, Hemmingson had never competed in a stock car. Leading up to Des Moines, Hemmingson would enter the American Speed Association's Pontiac Excitement 300K in Brainerd, Minnesota, where he'd finish 6th. From there, he would test his ARCA car at a road course near Rockford, Illinois. Likely this track was Blackhawk Farms Raceway in South Beloit, as that's located within 30 minutes north of Rockford. 1993 NASCAR Busch All-Star Tour champion Bob Hill out of Story City, Iowa would also enter the event. Being signed up for 8 races in 1994, Hill would add Des Moines to his schedule after picking up sponsorship from Corral Contractors. The ARCA race weekend would come on the same weekend the All-Star Tour would schedule an event in West Liberty, Iowa, in which Hill would skip. Hill would end up competing in only 13 races in the All-Star Tour that season, with just one win under his belt in the season opening race in Radcliffe, Iowa, going into the Des Moines race weekend. But perhaps the biggest professional racing names that would attempt the Des Moines ARCA race would be NASCAR Cup drivers Jimmy Spencer and Michael Waltrip. In 1994, Spencer moved over to Junior Johnson's team, replacing Hut Strickland, who was released at the end of 1993 following a disappointing finish of 24th in points. Prior to Spencer's move over to Johnson's team, he had scored his then career best finish of second at the Winston 500 from Talladega with Bobby Allison's team. It would, however, be overshadowed by how that race ended.
Checkered is waving. Ernie Irvan wins and Rusty spins and gets airborne and flips wildly right at the start-finish line, very reminiscent of his accident at Daytona.
Michael Waltrip, meanwhile, was entering his 9th season with Bahari Racing in the Cup Series. Like Spencer, his best Cup finish going into 1994 was a second place as well. In what doubled as his first career top 5 finish in Cup Series competition, Waltrip came home second in the 1988 Miller High Life 500 from Pocono. Unfortunately, it was the same race where Bobby Allison would suffer his career-ending crash. He would not return to the cockpit of a race car until 1993, when he would attempt the Fastmasters Championship. Additionally, Trans Am drivers like Dorsey Schrader were too expressing interest in running the race. However, closer to race day, they began to change their tune. Jack Baldwin argued that the cars, specifically their brakes, would not hold up during the race. Dorsey Schrader argued that the 3,500-pound stock cars wouldn't hold up if a 2,400-pound Trans Am car, with the wheels and tires and brakes we have, couldn't be stopped as well. Schrader also added that the Trans Am car's brake rotor is as big as their wheel. We have more brake than they have wheel on the car, and we can't stop them. Future NASCAR road course ringer Ron Fellows argued too about the braking issue. I would guess probably 4 or 5 laps tops, and these guys are going to be running out of braking, so it'll be interesting to see how they cope with it. Despite Schrader's negative outlook regarding the ARCA race, series regulars Frank Kimmel and Bobby Bowser offered their own viewpoint. Kimmel argued that while there would be some off-road excursions and things, the race would play out surprisingly clean. Bowser's only negative outlook was that he never ran a street race before. Every corner to me seems like it's going to be blind. Like a road course, you can look across most of them and see what's going to be around the other side of the corner. but these corners are more than likely going to be blind corners. While none of the then full-time active Trans Am competitors would take part in the ARCA support race, a former driver would. Scott Legacy previously made 12 starts in the Trans Am Tour between 1990 and 1991, and then a one-off at Lime Rock Park in 1993, where he finished 12th. Legacy made 2 previous starts in ARCA, finishing 40th in his debut at Daytona in 1989, and then 25th at Heartland Park Topeka in 1992 for the Rouleau brothers. For the ARCA Des Moines Grand Prix, Legacy would reunite with the Rouleau brothers team for a 3rd consecutive season after having raced with the team in his NASCAR Cup debut in 1993 at Watkins Glen, where he finished 13th. It should also be noted that Jack Baldwin, prior to changing his view on the ARCA race, had attempted to bring Ken Schrader and 3-time NASCAR Cup champion Darrell Waltrip on board to compete. Of Darrell Waltrip's 4 starts in the ARCA Menards Series, he won in 2 of those starts at Heartland Park Topeka in 1992, and then the previous season at Texas World Speedway in an ARCA NASCAR West combination race, the Western Auto Shootout 2. Ken Schrader had entered into 8 previous ARCA Menards Series races up to this point, including that season's Toledo ARCA 150 from Toledo Speedway, though failed to turn a single lap, retiring due to engine issues. And while both Darrell Waltrip and Ken Schrader would decline to compete in this race, Schrader would enter a further 2 events at the Indiana State Fairgrounds and I-70 Speedway that season, picking up his 3rd career ARCA Menards win at the fairgrounds. Nevertheless, for Schrader, he would end up competing in 3 of the 4 major stock car races that Independence Day weekend, with the Cup race at Daytona Saturday, Xfinity Series in Milwaukee Sunday, and ASA at Hawkeye Downs Monday. Prior to Sunday's ARCA race, Cup Series regulars Michael Waltrip and Jimmy Spencer would compete at Daytona for Saturday morning's Pepsi 400. The points entering Saturday's race saw Michael sitting in 8th following a gradual progression in the points that started with a 31st place finish in the standings following the Daytona 500. Meanwhile, for Spencer, he qualified 3rd at a speed of 190.577 miles per hour, behind that year's Daytona 500 pole sitter Loy Allen Jr., and 2nd in points going into the Pepsi 400, Dale Earnhardt. Despite this, teammate Bill Elliott had to utilize a champion's provisional to make the field. Team owner Junior Johnson explained to ESPN's John Kernan why.
Well, the Spencer's car had been built to replace the one he had here in Daytona in February, and we changed the car around a little bit, and I think it, runs through the corners freer, and that makes it run a little quicker. But when Bill qualified the other day, evidently they left a plug wire or something loose on the car because it just didn't come up to speed. It's like 300 RPMs off from what he'd been running during his practice. So I think he'll be running a lot better today and probably be in the hunt all day long. But they're similar cars, but Spencer's is a later version of that type car.
In the race, both drivers would see a much better result at Daytona compared to the season-opening Daytona 500. On lap 79, Todd Bodine would make contact with Jeff Gordon on the backstretch going into turn 3. As Bodine slid down the banking, Jimmy Spencer veered up from the apron to avoid his car and made contact with not only Michael Waltrip, but also Ted Musgrave and Brett Bodine. Spencer would retire from the race alongside Musgrave and Todd Bodine, while Waltrip would finish the race 6 laps down in 31st. Following the last restart, both Michael Waltrip and Spencer would provide enough on-track action in the race's late stages. Coming to 32 to go, Michael Waltrip and Todd Bodine would make contact, which nearly sent Bodine in a spin, though fortunately he'd regain control and continue. As ESPN's Bob Jenkins mentioned during the race, Jimmy Spencer provided enough action all race long with Spencer, coming to 27 to go, rubbing door fenders with Dick Trickle. Around 25 to go, Spencer would finally catch up to the lead group of cars led by points leader Ernie Irvan. Coming back from a commercial break, viewers saw Spencer's teammate Bill Elliott off the pace, after Jeff Burton made contact with Elliott on the front stretch, causing him to lose momentum and fall back in the field. Just as Sterling Marlin would recover his car from a spin brought on by Jeff Gordon on the backstretch, Jimmy Spencer would make his move on Dale Earnhardt and Ken Schrader, advancing to second place with 10 laps to go. With 8 laps to go, Jimmy Spencer would catch up to race leader Ernie Irvan, with Dale Earnhardt and Mark Martin close by, in third and fourth respectively. With 6 laps to go, John Kernan said this when he spoke to Spencer prior to the race.
Well, let me tell you guys, this morning, the only driver, the only car that Jimmy Spencer was worried about getting around was the number 3 car, Dale Earnhardt. He said Earnhardt had probably the strongest car in the field. I said, well, who's got the second? He said, well, I do, of course. So Spencer, riding behind Ernie Irvan right now, is looking for Irvan to possibly make a mistake so he can take advantage of it. But he is not being intimidated. Spencer thinks he can get around Irvan.
Utilizing every inch of track to attempt to pass on Ernie Irvan, it would all come down to this moment on the final lap.
Here on the final circuit of this event. He heads up high on the racetrack once again with a lot of momentum buildup.
Yep, he's making Ernie protect that low side of the racetrack. He's going to have some momentum when he comes off this turn, Bob. He's going to have enough to move up beside of him, I believe.
And he makes a move to the inside at the halfway point down the backstretch, and he gets the lead. Or at least he gets an advantage on Earnhardt. They touch coming down the backstretch.
That's Ernie. Earnhardt, side by side. Here they come for the checkered flag. Who is it going to be?
Will it be Ernie Irvan on top or Jimmy Spencer on the low side? Off of corner number 4. Here they come. It's going to be a drag race to the checkered flag. Jimmy Spencer wins it. Whoa, baby. How about that? Jimmy Spencer becomes the third first-time winner in 1994.
With the win, Spencer would become the third different first-time winner that season after Sterling Marlin in the Daytona 500 and Jeff Gordon in the Coca-Cola 600. Following the Pepsi 400, both race winner Jimmy Spencer and Michael Waltrip would immediately depart Daytona Beach, Florida for Des Moines, Iowa. First round qualifying for the ARCA series would take place between 5 o'clock and 6:30 p.m. Central, with Grand Prix spokeswoman Colleen Miller projecting their arrival between 5:30 and 6 p.m. Central. Though the two drivers would arrive in time, the qualifying session itself would be canceled as a result of track repairs following Saturday's on-track sessions. With the starting grid now determined by car owner points, Bobby Bowser would start on the pole with Frank Kimmel to his outside. Cup drivers Waltrip and Spencer would start 28th and 29th respectively, getting their first on-track drive time in the two scheduled practice sessions prior to the race on Sunday. In the race itself, road racer Scott Legacy would go the distance and win the race. Legacy and the Rulo brothers initially brought a brand new car to the race, but given the track's demand on brakes, opted for a short track car instead, scrambling to get it together for Sunday's event. Legacy's key to winning the race was being smooth and driving it no differently to the SCCA machinery he drove in the past. This car is no different. It may look big and bulky, but you have to use a lot of finesse and drive the car smoothly. You can't toss it around if you want to go fast. Bobby Bowser and Eric Smith would battle with Legacy during the race, with Bowser coming home 4th and Smith finishing 6th, retiring 2 laps down due to a wheel issue. Jimmy Spencer would make it back-to-back top 5 finishes, coming home 3rd in the ARCA race after again winning Daytona the previous day. What made his finish impressive, though, was that it came with Spencer losing his brakes in the last half of the race. Only 5 drivers would finish on the lead lap, with Kimmel coming home 2nd and Gary Bradbury rounding out the top 5. The race would see 4 cautions for 16 laps and 18 total driver retirements. Jerry Glanville would come home 9th, finishing 4 laps down, while Michael Waltrip would finish 14th, retiring after 66 laps due to an oil pump issue. Among the Iowa drivers, Wayne Larson and Bob Hill would finish 11th and 12th respectively, while Chuck Hemmingson would finish 27th, retiring after 42 laps due to engine problems. Of the 38 cars entered, only Tom Bigelow and Steve Kosiski would not start. While some of the Trans Am drivers would be proven wrong in terms of the race seeing significant brake failures, one driver, Dorsey Schrader, would be proven right. This will be ARCA's first and last street race, but it also would serve as the final Des Moines Grand Prix for the Trans Am Series and its support events due to a combination of financial loss prior to the 1993 race weekend, and then said race weekend being partially canceled after that year's flooding. The final day of action saw racing from the Trans Am Series, Neon Celebrity Challenge, and American Continental Championship. The Trans Am race would be won by Dorsey Schrader, his second Trans Am win at the venue, after pole sitter Tommy Kendall ran out of fuel with 2 laps to go. Scott Pruitt would finish second, while Ron Fellows would round out the top three. It would not be until 2006 when the ARCA Menard Series would return to the state of Iowa, as they would run the season-ending Prairie Meadows 250 from the then newly opened Iowa Speedway. The race notably saw Stephen Wallace, son of 1989 Cup Series champion Rusty Wallace, who had a hand in designing the venue, pick up his fourth career and final ARCA victory after having earlier repaired his car from this incident with Juan Montoya, who had begun a transition to stock cars after leaving Formula One following that season's United States Grand Prix. The ARCA race, much like the headlining Trans Am event, would air on the Prime Sports Networks and its affiliates, with the 1-hour ARCA program's airtime varying in each region of the United States. The Trans Am race would air live. Since the inaugural Des Moines Grand Prix in 1989, ESPN had been home to the Trans Am race there and its supports. Beginning in 1994, ESPN would pass the broadcast rights over to Prime. The reason given, according to spokesman Dave Nagel, was that they weren't able to confirm time slots for the 1994 season, as had been requested by the SCCA. This left residents around central Iowa without a chance of seeing the Trans Am race. Telecommunications Inc., better known as TCI, struck a deal with Prime to air the race live on that Monday, July 4, on the TCI of Central Iowa-run Iowa Cable Network. Instead, the only other live motorsport event that ESPN would carry that weekend would be Formula One's French Grand Prix. The race was most notable for seeing the return of the defending IndyCar champion of 1993, Nigel Mansell, to the Williams team, where he won the F1 championship during the 1992 season. He and Williams test driver turned McLaren veteran David Coulthard would be splitting seat time in the ride that had been prepped initially for three-time world champion Ayrton Senna, who unfortunately passed away at that season's third round, the San Marino Grand Prix. Of course, it should also be noted that Senna had intended to replace the four-time world champion, who declared 1993 as his swan song, close on-track rival and dear friend, Alain Prost. So that will do it for this video. Thanks for watching, and I will see you next time.